The Correctional Services Department says it will be taking control of the privately run Mangaung Correctional Centre. This comes after the revelation of convicted rapist and murderer Thabo Bester's escape from this facility in May last year. Several officials have been served with suspension notices, while 3 others are facing investigation. The search is continuing for Bester and his alleged partner, Nandipha Makutumana, who are on the run. Our senior reporter, Silindelo Masikane, tracking that story for us. Joining us now live from Mangaung. Good afternoon, Silindelo. Welcome to today. Just give us some of the highlights of what came out from the briefing earlier today by the Acting Commissioner of Correctional Services.
Well, Bradan, I think the main highlight essentially is the fact that G4S Security has been booted out from running this Mangaung prison. We know now, following that briefing, that Correctional Services believes that security operations have been completely paralyzed in this institution, and so they have invoked Section 112 of the Correctional Services Act, meaning that effective immediately, Bradan, a manager from Correctional Services has officially taken over the running of Mangaung prison, and the director of the prison, who was from G4S Security, of course, has now been removed from the facility. And in fact, over the past hour or so, or 2 hours, even after post the briefing, Bradan, my colleague Thabo Bester and I have been outside the prison, and we've noticed essentially more and more Correctional Services officials moving into the premises. In fact, just after the briefing as well, the National Commissioner was doing his rounds. I think he had an oversight kind of inspection in the prison as well. And so we know now that, of course, the Justice Department as well as Correctional Services is also reviewing the contract that it has with G4S Security. We know that the contract itself lapses in 2026, but the department is now looking at some legal advice in terms of its contractual obligations, or the contractor's contractual obligations with regards to what transpired here. The Commissioner also describing Thabo Bester's escape as one of its kind. While the department has experienced a number of escape incidents in the past, this is certainly something that has never happened before. It's unprecedented in terms of the planning, the calculated, the calculated details in terms of the assistance that Thabo Bester received, not only from Correctional Services officials potentially, but G4S officials as well. And the fact that there was a vehicle that was allowed into the prison on the day of his escape without a pass. The National Commissioner saying that that shouldn't ever actually happen. And the fact that at this point there was a body potentially brought into the prison is something that the department is also, of course, still looking into. We know that the SAPS is still on a manhunt for Thabo Bester as well as Dr. Nandipha. And at this point, we've been told that they can't reveal too much detail in terms of how far they are with their investigations. But let's just take a listen, of course, to the National Commissioner during his briefing.
Tampering with surveillance cameras points to a failed monitoring system, deliberately orchestrated to conceal crucial evidence and individuals who aided Bester to escape. This is also a failure to guarantee safe custody of inmates and a breach in terms of the responsibilities allocated to the contractor. Failures from the contractor do not exonerate the officials in the employ of the Department of Correctional Services. These are officials who are tasked with specific responsibilities to oversee and monitor operations at Mangaung Correctional Facility. They ought to be in line with the Correctional Services Act and the concession contract. In this regard, the Director Contract Management based at our head office, the DCS Controller at Mangaung Correctional Facility, and the Deputy Controller have been served with suspension notices. And also as a result, the Departmental Investigation Unit has started looking into the conduct of these three officials and any other official that would be found wanting as a result of the findings and recommendations of the investigation report.
Silindelo, I understand the ANC governing party has also made some comments, and the entire saga is found to be quite embarrassing.
Certainly so, Bradan. I think this incident has been quite embarrassing for government as a whole in terms of the lapses and oversight, in terms of the role of correctional service when it comes to these private-public partnerships with private entities that are running institutions like a prison. I mean, a prison like Mangaung prison, that's a C-Max prison, housing people that have been convicted of very serious crimes. The people who are housed in here, at least 3,000 of them, are very dangerous and have been removed from society for a reason. And so the fact that it seems that the security breaches that have happened here have warranted that correctional services, take over operations just shows you, I think, the seriousness of the situation. And the fact that it took so long for correctional services to finalize their investigations, I think is also something that still needs to be questioned by the department in terms of who they need to hold accountable for that. Because, mind you, Thabo Bester escaped from this facility, Bradan, on the 3rd of May, 2022. It's almost 10 months later. And only recently have we discovered that Thabo Bester has essentially been living his best life outside of prison, whereas we were all under the impression that he had potentially died inside. So there was a cabinet briefing, I understand, this morning. Let's just take a listen to some of the comments made there.
Government is embarrassed. It's an embarrassing situation that a convicted criminal with sentence to life and 75 years escapes from prison. That's why Cabinet has instructed law enforcement to make sure that he gets recaptured as soon as possible, but also to make sure that everybody who was involved in assisting or aiding him, or who was negligent in any form of and manner, must face consequences, including those who have already been dismissed from the Correctional Services Centre. As government, we take seriously our responsibility to make sure that convicted criminals serve their term in jail, and those who are their victims feel justice that has been served. And in that regard, that's why Cabinet has directed the Department of Correctional Services to ensure that they fast-track the takeover of those correctional facilities. You'll recall where Thabo Bester, Fugitive Thabo Bester escaped. It's a correctional center operated by G4S, and we've instructed that the two centers that are operated by the private companies must be taken over as speedily as possible.
You know, one thing that's frightening, Silindelo, as you said, is 10 months later. One just wonders if any other hardened criminal did a deal as well to escape from a prison like this one. But I see the governing party making some comments today through its Secretary General.
Certainly so. Bradan, echoing the sentiments of what we heard from the cabinet briefing as well, this has been quite an embarrassing and concerning situation that's unfolded. And I think for the ruling party as well, they are adding their voice to the reaction around Thabo Bester's escape, and also calling for government and the SAPS to ensure that Bester is rearrested, and those who assisted him with his escape, that they also face the full might of the law. Let's take a listen.
The security cluster matter is an embarrassment for the security of the country. That a criminal can fake their death and do all these things. These things, we see them in movies, they happen everywhere. That somebody has faked their death and went out of jail, obviously through conniving with the people there in the prison and so on. The question is, do we have the capacity to recover from that? And that is what is important. We've got to instill confidence that our security forces, and in particular the cluster, is able to deal with such lapses in the security of the country.
It's Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the governing party there, making comments and adding to the comments about how embarrassing it's been that a prisoner has escaped from a high-security maximum prison in the Free State. Ending that update by Silindelo Masikane from Mangaung.